This is Bill Moffett with Ayrstone Productivity. The topic for today is bringing the wireless network into buildings. So using the AyrMesh products, show you how to bring their AyrMesh network into outbuildings, especially metal outbuildings. So what we see is that that growers frequently have buildings on the property. They'll have an AyrMesh hub, and the next question they'll ask is, how do I get this inside my buildings? Because the Wi-Fi won't penetrate many buildings, and it won't penetrate any steel buildings, which are, of course, very common. So when we're looking at the farm, getting that Wi-Fi inside of buildings, or at least getting a network connection inside of those buildings, becomes an important thing. So the first step, of course, is have an AyrMesh hub. Connect it to wherever they have internet access, put it up in the air as far as you can. That gives you Wi-Fi around the farmyard, wherever it may be. The AyrMesh hub, rather, is the building block of the wireless farm network. So, the first one is called the gateway hub. Excuse me, additional hubs are called remote hubs. So the next step is to add AyrMesh receivers to the buildings. Now, in some cases, you may also add an AyrMesh hub to one of the buildings. If you've got a building that's out a mile or two away, you might want to build the network off of that building and put a hub out there to repeat that signal out into the greater farmland. But for the moment, we'll just say we'll use receivers. That brings an Ethernet port into the building, because you mount the receiver up on the building, on the side or on the top of the building, and you bring an Ethernet cable inside the building, plug that into the power supply, and then the LAN port on that power supply is a live port on your network. And what that means is the grower can now plug any device into that port with that receiver mounted on the outside, and you've got internet access and local network access inside. And the importance of local network access, I just want to point out, is that, for instance, if you've got IP cameras on the farm, they're all on your local network, so you can access them locally without having to go through the internet. Similarly, if you have file shares or printers on the network, you can access those things. If you're out in your outbuilding, in the farm office, out in a barn, wherever it may be, you can access those things from anywhere on the farm as easily as if you were at home. So step 3 is to extend that network indoors using the AyrMesh indoor access points, indoor APs, and or the AyrMesh switch to provide indoor Wi-Fi and additional indoor ports. So if you have 2 computers inside the building, you just put a switch on there and you can plug both computers into there. If, for instance, you want to use your iPad inside the building, use an indoor AP, and you can use both. So you could have, for instance, a couple of IP cameras, maybe one on the inside, one on the outside. Those could be plugged into the switch, and then the Wi-Fi for use with your smartphone or iPad. That's very simply how you do it. Like I say, you can also use hubs on the buildings if you're building the network using those buildings. You can just use receivers this way. Either way, it works exactly the same way. The indoor AP hooks onto the power supply that's on the inside of the building. The switch connects to the LAN port and gives you additional Ethernet ports. Really, that's all there is to it. This is a picture of the indoor AP for those who have not seen it before. It's a very small device. You can see how it connects onto the end of that power supply, and it preserves the LAN port there, so you can still you can use the indoor AP and still use the switch. The PoE side goes out to the receiver or the hub. The AyrMesh switch is just a simple Ethernet switch. It's an 8-port switch, so you plug one end into the LAN port, and you've got 7 more ports that you can plug devices into. You can use this anywhere in the network, of course, on a remote hub, on a receiver at the end of an AyrMesh bridge, or even just on the router at home. For instance, in some cases, you may have an AyrMesh hub and 2 AyrMesh bridges coming off of the home router. So you may run out of ports. You may want to add one of these to the home router, so you just have more Ethernet ports. That's what the switch is for. Now, as always, there are resources on the net, ayrstone.com, especially the How It Works section, which has been updated and is continually updated. Blog.ayrstone.com, the Ayrstone blog. There are lots of examples of advice, some practical examples of how to set things up. And of course, support.ayrstone.com, which redirects to our Zendesk site for installation instructions, troubleshooting tips, frequently asked questions, all that kind of thing. So at this point, I'm going to finish up the presentation and go ahead and open up the Q&A. So if you have a question, what you'll see is there's a little white section on the right-hand side that should show up. If it doesn't show up, go to that little matrix of dots in the upper right-hand corner and click on Q&A. It may be showing the showcase at the moment. If you've got questions, there's a little blue bar at the bottom that says Ask a New Question. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and ask a new question right now. I'm going to ask, can you also use AyrMesh bridges to connect outbuildings? And that should show up on your screen. It's going to show up on my screen here. And you can probably see it there now. And the answer to that, very simply, is yes, you can, of course. The AyrMesh bridge has the advantage that it will go quite a bit further than the AyrMesh hub because it's a directional radio. The disadvantage of the AyrMesh bridge is it doesn't provide outdoor Wi-Fi. So, for instance, if you wanted to connect one building to the other and not have Wi-Fi between them, you could use a bridge on one building and a bridge on the other building, a bridge radio, I should say. So one bridge, 2 radios, and then that would connect those 2 buildings. So, you know, in our previous example, if we had one building that had the receiver on the side, bringing in the internet connection, you've got the power supply inside, you could then hook from that power supply to another power supply, going back outside up to a bridge radio, taking that signal to another building up to 5 miles away. Inside that building, you can connect an indoor AP to have indoor Wi-Fi and or a switch to have additional Ethernet ports. So the advantage of the AyrMesh system is the flexibility it gives you in solving the customer's problem, making their farm work the way they want it to work. So you can use the various pieces, the hubs, the receivers, the bridges, in order to give them exactly what they need to maximize their productivity. All right, I'm going to take a quick look here and see if we've got any questions that have been emailed in. And taking a quick look here, I do not see any questions coming in. So this is going to turn out to be a very quick webinar. I want to thank you for attending, and we'll pull together some more in the near future. Thank you again. This is Bill Moffett with Ayrstone Productivity.